The first time Emma thought her billionaire husband might actually get her killed, he shoved her into a locked room and said, without a trace of emotion, "If you come out before I tell you to, you'll regret it." Then he slammed the steel door in her face. Emma stumbled backward, breathless, clutching the edge of a narrow table as the lock engaged with a hard metallic click. Outside, alarms exploded through the mansion. Not house alarms. Security alarms. Red lights flashed along the ceiling beyond the reinforced glass panel. Somewhere downstairs, men were shouting. She heard the crash of something heavy, then sharp orders through a radio. Her heart pounded so violently she could barely think. 3 months ago, she had been a woman with 3 jobs, overdue rent, and a mother dying in a hospital bed. Now she was hidden in the servants' wing of a billionaire's mansion, locked behind bulletproof walls by a husband who looked at her as if she were a burden he regretted carrying. A pounding struck the other side of the door. Emma froze. Not Alexander. Different footsteps. Heavier. Faster. Then a man's voice shouted, "She's in here." Emma's blood turned to ice. The door handle jerked violently. Someone was trying to get in. Her gaze flew around the room. The windows were sealed. The fireplace tools were too far away. Her phone had no signal in this cursed section of the house. Of course it didn't. Alexander controlled everything. The handle jerked again. A gunshot cracked outside. Emma screamed. Then she heard Alexander. "Move away from that door." His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Another shot, then another. The men outside shouted. Footsteps pounded down the corridor. Silence followed for one long, unbearable second. Then the lock disengaged. Alexander stood there in a black suit splattered at the shoulder with blood. She couldn't tell if it was his or someone else's. His jaw was tight, his breathing uneven, and there was a pistol in his hand. He looked at her once, quickly, scanning her from head to toe. "Are you hurt?" Emma could barely speak. "What is happening?" Instead of answering, he grabbed her wrist and pulled her into the corridor. She yanked against him. "Alexander, let go of me." "Not now. You locked me in. To keep you alive." She almost laughed at the cold absurdity of that, but then she saw the expression in his eyes. Not irritation, not cruelty, fear. Real fear. It vanished so fast she might have imagined it. By the time they reached the stairwell, his face had hardened again into that familiar, merciless mask. Marcus came running up from below. "The north gate's compromised. Security has 2 men down. Lang's people made it past the outer wall." Emma stopped dead. "Lang?" Alexander turned on her with brutal sharpness. "I told you never to leave this wing after dark." The accusation hit like a slap. Emma stared at him, stunned. "You think this is my fault? This happened because you were seen." Marcus looked between them, tense. "Sir." "Enough," Alexander snapped. "Even now. Even here. Even with armed men on the property, he found a way to make her small." Emma's throat tightened with humiliation and rage. "I hate you," she whispered. "Good," he said coldly. "Keep hating me. It may save your life." Emma had no idea that every cruel thing he had done since the day he married her had been for this exact reason. To make sure, when monsters came looking, they would never know how much she mattered. 3 months earlier, the rain came down in silver sheets, turning the city into a blur of headlights and wet concrete. Emma Chun pulled her bike under the awning of St. Jude Medical Center and checked the time on her cracked phone. 11:43 p.m. Her food delivery shift had ended 40 minutes ago. Her waitress shift at the diner would begin at 6 in the morning. She was 26, permanently tired, and 1 late payment away from disaster. Inside the hospital, the oncology floor was quiet. Her mother looked smaller every week, the blanket rising over narrow shoulders that once carried half the world without complaint. "You're soaked," her mother said the moment Emma entered. "You're impossible," Emma said, forcing brightness into her voice as she poured soup into a hospital bowl. They discussed trivial things: the weather, a neighbor, a television show neither had time to watch. Then the doctor came in. He spoke gently, which Emma had learned was worse than speaking plainly. "The standard treatment isn't producing the response we hoped for," he said. There is another option. Experimental. Promising. But not covered by insurance. Emma's fingers tightened around the edge of the bed. How much? The doctor hesitated. Too much for most families. When he left, her mother stared at the blanket and said, "No more loans, no more jobs, no more disappearing under this burden because of me. It's not because of you. It is." Her mother's voice broke. "Your father would never have wanted this." At the mention of her father, something old and bruised twisted inside Emma. David Chin had died 5 years earlier, a month after his business collapsed under debts no one fully explained. Emma kissed her mother's forehead. "We're not giving up." Her phone buzzed. A known number. Emma stepped into the hallway. "Hello." A man's voice, smooth and formal. "Miss Emma Chin?" "Yes. My name is Marcus Hale. I'm calling on behalf of Alexander Knight." The name hit like cold water. Knight Global, the ruthless young CEO whose face appeared in financial magazines with words like merciless, brilliant, untouchable. Emma leaned against the wall. "I think you have the wrong person." "I assure you I do not. Mr. Knight would like to meet with you tonight regarding your late father's debt." The corridor seemed to tilt. "My father's what?" "There is a car waiting outside the hospital. If you come now, Mr. Knight is prepared to make you an offer." Emma almost hung up. Rich men did not summon women like her at midnight for anything good. But the doctor's soft voice still echoed, "Too much for most families." She looked through the small window in her mother's room. Her mother had closed her eyes, one hand curled weakly around the blanket. Emma swallowed. 10 minutes. The car smelled like leather and money. The elevator to the penthouse required a key card and fingerprint scan. By the time the doors opened, Emma felt as if she were entering a different species of world. Glass walls overlooked the city. Dim lights gleamed on marble floors. At the far end of the room stood a man in a dark suit. Alexander Knight. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered, composed with a stillness that made the entire room seem arranged around him. He turned at the sound of her steps, and she understood instantly why magazines loved his face. He was beautiful in a hard, distant way. High cheekbones, severe mouth, dark eyes that missed nothing and gave nothing back. He did not offer his hand. "Miss Chin." "Mr. Knight." He gestured toward the long table. A folder waited there. "Sit." "Not please." "Not if you would." Emma sat anyway. Alexander remained standing. "Your father borrowed $5 million from my family's holding company." "My father never borrowed $5 million. He did." He slid documents toward her. His signature. The collateral clauses. The repayment schedule. Emma looked down, pulse hammering. Her father's signature was there. So was the company name she vaguely remembered from overheard arguments. The dates matched the final year before everything fell apart. "He never told us." "Perhaps he intended to protect you." The words held no warmth. They sounded like a judgment. Emma lifted her chin. "If this debt was real, why wait 5 years to come after us?" "Because until now, I had no reason to collect." Cold, casual, as if her life were a line item. She pushed the papers back. "Then collect from what? My apartment? My bike? My mother's hospital bracelet." He studied her face for a long moment. "Your mother is ill." It wasn't a question. Emma's stomach tightened. "You investigated me? I don't make offers without facts." "Offers?" Marcus stepped forward, setting down another folder, thicker than the first. Alexander finally sat across from her. "I'll clear the debt, every cent. I'll also pay for your mother's treatment, including the experimental program." Emma stared at him. No one spoke. Then she asked the only question that mattered. "What do you want?" His answer came without hesitation. "A marriage." The room went silent in a way that felt unnatural. Emma laughed once because the alternative was panic. "I'm sorry. A legal marriage. 1 year. You will live in my house, attend public events when required, and remain available when instructed." This is insane. It is practical. For who? For me. And after a year? The debt remains cleared. Your mother remains under my care. You are free. Emma stood so abruptly the chair legs scraped marble. No. Alexander's face did not change. Then your father's debt will be enforced in full. Rage flared through her. You'd extort a dying woman's daughter into marriage? His gaze stayed on hers, cold and unreadable. I'm offering a solution. You may accept or decline. She wanted to scream. She wanted to wake up. Instead she heard the doctor again. Experimental. Not covered. Too much. You could just pay for the treatment, she said hoarsely. If this is really nothing to you. I don't do charity. The cruelty of it landed exactly where he intended. Emma felt her nails bite into her palms. Why me? Something unreadable flickered in his eyes and vanished. You're not my choice, Miss Chen. You're my obligation. Obligation. Not a bride. Not a partner. Barely a person. Marcus shifted beside the table. Alexander opened the contract and turned it toward her. There will be rules. He recited them as if reading merger terms. She would live in his estate immediately. She would not disclose the personal nature of the arrangement. She would attend events as required. She would not interfere in his business. She would not mistake the arrangement for affection. This is a business transaction, he said. Nothing more. Emma looked at the contract, then at the rain/city beyond the glass, then at the bill total she had memorized so well it showed up in dreams. When she signed, her hand shook. Marcus took the contract and murmured quietly, almost too quietly, "Sir, are you certain this method is necessary?" Alexander never looked away from Emma. It's the only way. The wedding happened 48 hours later in a private courthouse with 2 lawyers, Marcus, and a board judge. Emma wore a cream dress selected by strangers. Alexander wore black and never once touched her except for the legal necessity of slipping the ring onto her finger. His skin was warm. The gesture was not. By evening, she was in his mansion, standing under a chandelier larger than her old apartment. A housekeeper led her upstairs. Emma expected the master suite or at least a glossy guest room. Instead, the woman opened a door at the end of a secluded corridor. "The servants' wing," she said. Emma stared. The room itself was beautiful, larger than any bedroom she'd ever had, with a carved bed and view of the gardens. But the meaning hit harder than the luxury. Separate. Hidden. Secondary. Mr. Knight's instructions, the housekeeper said and left. An hour later, Alexander appeared at the doorway. She did not invite him in. "So this is how it's going to be?" she asked. "This arrangement works best with boundaries." "You mean humiliation?" His expression remained carved from stone. "Call it what you like. This wing is for staff. It is where you'll stay." "Why?" "Because I said so." The answer was so blunt, so contemptuous, that heat rose to her face. She crossed her arms. "Anything else?" "Yes." His eyes swept the room, checking things she did not understand. "Do not leave the grounds without notifying Marcus. Do not accept calls from unknown numbers. Do not speak to the press alone." Emma laughed bitterly. "Worried I'll embarrass you?" Something tightened briefly in his jaw. "I'm worried," he said, "that you'll fail to follow instructions." Then he turned and walked away. Emma stared after him, already hating the sound of his footsteps. If there was a special cruelty reserved for women married into wealth but denied belonging, Emma learned it quickly. At breakfast, staff addressed her as Mrs. Knight, but with a distance they never used for family. At lunch, she sat alone while Alexander worked behind closed doors. At dinner, she was informed he was eating at the office. The only thing that changed immediately was her mother's care. Within 3 days, her mother had been transferred to a private oncology suite. New specialists arrived. The experimental treatment was approved. Emma knew who had arranged it. She also knew he would despise her gratitude. The first time they appeared in public as a married couple was at a charity gala in a museum of modern art. Emma spent 2 hours being dressed by professionals into a silver gown she could never have afforded. When she came downstairs, Alexander looked up from his cufflinks. For one suspended second, his eyes rested on her in complete silence. Then his face went blank again. "The car is waiting." At the museum, cameras exploded in flashes. Questions flew from every direction. Mr. Knight, why the sudden marriage? Is this a love match? Alexander took Emma's elbow, not gently, and guided her up the stairs. Then he said, cool and clear enough for every microphone. My wife and I have a contractual understanding. There's nothing more interesting than that. A ripple of laughter moved through the press. Emma felt it like a slap. Inside the gala hall, he released her immediately. When she instinctively reached for his arm, he stepped away as if her touch inconvenienced him. She'll be fine on her own, he told a board member. Emma watched him move through the room, shaking hands, charming investors, speaking to elegant women while she stood near a sculpture pretending not to hear the whispers. Contractual wife? How grim. Not exactly his type. Emma went to the champagne table because it was easier to hold a glass than hold herself together. That was when a man joined her. He was older than Alexander, with slick dark hair and a smile that showed too many teeth. Mrs. Knight, he said. Victor Lang. Emma knew the name. Victor Lang owned half the shipping lines on the coast and had recently spent months feuding with Knight Global in the business press. Pleasure, she said carefully. Victor looked over at Alexander, who was deep in conversation and not looking at them at all. Newly married, Victor said. You must be very important to him. Emma gave the only answer that felt safe. I don't think importance enters into our arrangement. Victor's smile sharpened. No. Before Emma could answer, Alexander appeared at her side. Lang. Knight. Victor's gaze moved between them. I was just congratulating your wife. Alexander did not look at Emma. She bores easily. Don't trap her with small talk. It was so casually dismissive, so openly demeaning, that even Victor blinked. Then he laughed. When Victor moved away, Emma turned on Alexander in a whisper. What is wrong with you? He took a sip of whiskey. You'll need thicker skin than that if you're going to survive this world. I didn't ask for this world. No, he said. You asked for your mother to live. The words struck exactly where her defenses were thinnest. He left her standing there under the museum lights. The next morning every entertainment site featured photos from the gala. Billionaire's unloved bride. Cold marriage confirmed. Emma threw her phone across the bed. Days became weeks. Cruelty settled into routine. One afternoon, while sorting old bills, she found an advertisement for an online business certification course. Years ago, before money collapsed and grief took over, Emma had dreamed of studying management. On impulse, she enrolled in the introductory program and began lessons late at night. It felt like breathing after being underwater too long. Alexander came in without knocking. Emma snapped the laptop half closed. Do you mind? He glanced at the screen. What is this? Nothing that concerns you. He walked closer, read the page, and his face hardened. A business course? Yes. He took the laptop from the desk before she could stop him. Hey! You're wasting time. It's my time. Not while you live under my roof. Emma rose, shaking with anger. You think because you paid my bills you own my future too? His eyes flashed. I think you should stop chasing foolish fantasies and focus on the role you agreed to. My role? Standing still while you humiliate me? Exactly. He closed the laptop with deliberate force and handed it back. The Wi-Fi access in this wing will be shut down. You are unbelievable. He looked almost furious now, though she could not understand why. Get some sleep, he said coldly and left. The internet went dead 10 minutes later. Emma sat on the edge of her bed and cried until her throat hurt. 2 days later, a secure tablet appeared on her desk with no note attached. It contained books, lectures, and a full business curriculum under a student account registered to Carter. Emma assumed it was some generic device from the staff. She used it anyway because she was stubborn, never imagining who had arranged it. The worst night came at a private dinner hosted by one of Alexander's investors. Emma had learned by then how to move through rooms full of expensive people while making herself small. Smile when necessary. Speak little. Never expect kindness. Victor Lang was there again. He approached her just as the first course ended, carrying a glass of red wine. Mrs. Knight, he said warmly, you look less miserable tonight. I'm adapting. Dangerous thing, adaptation. He lifted his glass. One begins to believe unpleasant situations are normal. His shoulder bumped hers. The wine went down the front of her pale dress in a dark crimson sheet. Conversation around them halted. Oh, Victor said, not sounding sorry at all. How clumsy of me. Emma stood frozen, humiliation burning through her. This time, surely, Alexander would say something. He was already at her side. Hope rose before she could stop it. Then he looked at the stain and said in a voice everyone could hear, "My wife has a talent for incompetence. Please excuse us." A few people laughed awkwardly. Emma's face went hot, then cold. Alexander pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and held it out to her like one might toss a scrap to a servant. "Clean yourself up." She took it because she was too stunned not to. Then she walked out of the dining room with as much dignity as she could salvage, reached the hallway, and broke into a run. By the time she reached the car Marcus was holding open, she could barely breathe. "Mrs. Knight," he said quietly. "Did he send you to finish the performance?" Marcus hesitated. "Please get in. I'm taking you home." Emma got in. She stared out the window all the way back and never unfolded the handkerchief clenched in her fist. Her mother's health improved enough that she began speaking of discharge, of coming to see the mansion, of finally meeting the husband Emma had discussed only in vague, edited fragments. "Bring her here on Sunday," her mother said over the phone. "I want to see where you live." Emma looked across the breakfast room at Alexander, who was reading financial reports. "She wants to visit," Emma said carefully when she hung up. "No." The answer was immediate. Emma blinked. "You didn't even think about it." "I don't need to. She's my mother. This is not a guest house. She just wants to see me. She can see you elsewhere." Emma pushed back her chair. "She is weak, recovering, and terrified that I married a stranger. I am asking for one afternoon." He set down the report at last. "Your mother cannot come here. Ever." Ever. Emma stared at him in disbelief. "Really are that heartless?" His expression gave her nothing. "If that helps you understand the situation, yes." Tears of rage stung her eyes. "She almost died. She's alive because of the contract." That did it. Something inside Emma, stretched and bruised for months, finally snapped. "Keep your contract," she said. "I'm done." She left before he could answer, climbed the stairs, and dragged out the suitcase she had brought from her apartment. She packed quickly, jeans, sweaters, books, the cheap framed photo of her parents. She did not know where she would go. She only knew she could not spend another day being purchased and belittled by a man who seemed to enjoy watching her dignity bleed out. At 2 a.m, suitcase in hand, she slipped into the dark corridor. Voices drifted from downstairs. Alexander's study. Emma would have kept walking if she had not heard her mother's name. "Buy out the entire hospital wing if necessary," Alexander said. His voice was low, rougher than usual. Not the polished public steel. Something frayed beneath it. "No, I don't care what regulations have to be navigated. Mrs. Chin gets the treatment. The complete protocol. Fly the specialist in from Zurich if that's what it takes." Emma stopped moving. "There can be no connection back to me," he continued. "If Lang traces the payment chain, we have a problem." Silence. Then the click of the call ending. Emma crept closer, heart pounding. The study door was ajar. Marcus entered carrying a file. "Sir." Alexander stood by the desk, one hand braced against it. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, tie loosened. "This is getting harder to maintain," Marcus said. "She thinks you hate her." Alexander let out a bitter laugh with no humor in it. "Better she hates me than ends up like Olivia." Emma's fingers tightened around the suitcase handle. Marcus lowered his voice. "Lang has been quiet for weeks. Perhaps he's shifted attention." Victor Lang does not shift attention. He waits. "So we continue?" "We continue." Marcus hesitated. "For 8 more months?" Alexander turned away, toward the dark window. "I'll do it for 8 years if I have to." Emma could not breathe. Marcus's next words came softly. Your debt to her father has already been repaid 100 times over. No. Alexander's voice dropped to something raw. David Chin saved my life. And Victor killed him for it. Emma's suitcase slipped from her fingers with a soft thud. Inside the study, both men went still. Panic shot through her. She fled before they could open the door, running barefoot back to her room where she locked herself inside and pressed both hands over her mouth. Killed him. Not dead. Not charity. Something else. She began with the room. Once she looked past the insult of its location, details emerged. The door was reinforced steel hidden under polished wood. The windows were triple-paned and resistant to impact. A panel near the bed she had assumed controlled room service was a silent alarm system linked directly to mansion security. The servants' wing was the safest section of the house. Then she examined the tablet account more carefully. Tuition records. Course registration. Payment receipt. Paid in full by an anonymous private sponsor. Date of enrollment. The same night Alexander had shut down her Wi-Fi. Her throat tightened. Next she searched for Victor Lang. The polished business articles came first. Then the lawsuits. Then the accidents. A former partner's brother was found drowned. An ex-girlfriend of a rival killed in a hit-and-run. And one old article from 5 years ago, buried under archived local reports. Olivia Chin, 29, dies in a late-night car crash. Emma stared at the screen until the words blurred. Olivia, her sister. Her brilliant, laughing older sister who had died on a rainy road when the police said she'd probably swerved too late. Emma opened the article with trembling fingers. At the bottom was a photo from a charity event. Olivia, smiling. Beside her stood a younger Alexander Knight. The caption identified them as attendees at a university foundation dinner. A second article called Olivia, a rumored companion of rising financier Alexander Knight. Emma sat back hard. Her sister had known him. More than knowing him. And she had never told Emma. That evening Emma took out the handkerchief from the dinner with Victor. The stain had dried brown at the edges. She unfolded it fully at last. Inside, in small precise handwriting. Car outside. Marcus will take you home. Trust me. Emma closed her eyes. Trust me. The same man who had stood there while she was humiliated. The same man who, if Marcus was to be believed, had been making sure her mother lived and her room could withstand a siege. For 3 weeks Emma watched, learned, and quietly made calls of her own. A detective attached to a federal task force had once reopened Olivia's case after financial crimes linked several accidents back to Victor Lang's associates. Emma found his name in an old article and contacted him from a prepaid phone. At first he thought she was a grieving relative chasing ghosts. Then she mentioned Alexander Knight, her father, and the timeline. The task force took her seriously after that. They had been trying for years to get Victor on conspiracy and homicide charges. What they lacked was something direct. Something current. Emma did not tell Alexander. The detective had said, if Knight doesn't know, his reactions will be genuine. If Lang is watching, that matters. So Emma waited. She kept attending events. She let Alexander play the villain. And while he thought he was protecting her alone, she began preparing the trap that would save them both. Emma stood pressed against Alexander's back as he shielded her in the stairwell, gun in hand, while Victor Lang's voice echoed through the intercom system. Send her out. And I might be merciful. Alexander opened a secure panel and removed a second pistol. Marcus, lockdown protocol. Emma stepped forward. No. Both men turned. Emma, Alexander said sharply. Get back to your room. She met his eyes. I'm done hiding. Victor's voice crackled through the speaker again, smooth and amused. Do you remember Olivia, Knight? How she begged at the end? Alexander went white with fury. Emma moved before he could. She took the intercom from Marcus's hand. Victor. The pause. Mrs. Knight. Or should I say the disposable wife? You want me? She said. Then listen carefully. I'm coming out. Alexander caught her wrist. Emma, no. She looked at him once, hoping he'd understand later. Then she said into the intercom, but if you want me, you'll tell me what happened to Olivia. I deserve to know what you did to my sister. Victor laughed. Your sister was a lesson. A very effective one. Say it clearly, Emma said, forcing steel into her voice. Was her death an accident? No, Victor said, sounding almost bored. Nothing about Olivia was accidental. She should have stayed out of grown men's wars. Just like you should have. Emma closed her eyes for one heartbeat. Then she smiled. Thank you, she said. The front lawn exploded with blue lights. Shouts erupted through the speakers. Engines revved. Doors slammed. Federal agents. Hands where we can see them. For the first time, Victor's composure cracked. What the hell? Emma touched the hidden microphone under her collar. You like tests, Mr. Lang, she said. So do I. She turned to Alexander, who stared at her in stunned disbelief. I've been working with the FBI for 3 weeks. The study door burst open as more agents entered with Marcus behind them. It's done, Marcus said, breathless. Then he noticed Emma and the wire. Apparently very done. On the desk speaker came the sound of chaos, then handcuffs, then silence. Alexander looked from the intercom to Emma. You wore a wire? Yes. Without telling me? I learned from the best. Her voice shook at last now that it was over. Every cruel thing you did was to protect me. I needed one thing to be my choice. For a second he said nothing. Then he crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her against him so hard she felt the force of his fear in it. His arms trembled. Don't ever do that again, he said into her hair. It was the first time he had held her like a husband. The first time he had sounded like a man who had nearly lost everything. Emma closed her eyes and let herself hold him back. Once the house was quiet again and federal agents had finally left. Alexander was in his study, jacket off, reading under the green-shaded lamp when Emma walked in and shut the door behind her. He looked up sharply. Why are you here? No more games, she said. Tell me the truth. All of it. His face changed so slightly most people would have missed it. But Emma had studied him long enough to read the fracture beneath the surface. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. She stepped forward. I know about Olivia. I know my father knew you. I know Victor Lang is not just some business rival. And I know my room is fortified like a panic vault. Silence pooled between them. Then Alexander put down the file in his hands. Who told you? You did. Or enough of it. Her voice shook now, with fury and grief and all the sleepless questions. The night I tried to leave, I heard you with Marcus. So don't insult me with more lies. He closed his eyes briefly, as if something he had held up for months was finally too heavy. When he looked at her again, the cold mask was gone. He looked tired. Human. Dangerous in an entirely different way because she could see the pain now, naked and unguarded. Sit down, Emma. I'd rather stand. A flicker of almost amusement touched his mouth and disappeared. That sounds like you. For a moment neither spoke. Then he said, your father was my mentor before anyone knew my name. I was 24, arrogant, and about to sign a deal with Victor Lang's people that would have handed them leverage over my company. Your father found the trap in the paperwork. Emma's anger thinned enough for surprise. He warned me. Stopped me from signing. In doing so, he cost Victor a fortune. Alexander's gaze drifted to the rain streaking the window. Victor retaliated. He destroyed your father's business piece by piece, buried him under debts, then made sure every door closed when he tried to recover. Emma felt suddenly sick. My father's heart attack. Alexander's jaw tightened. I cannot prove it in court, but I know Victor pushed him to that edge. And Olivia. He nodded once. She and I were together. Not publicly, but yes. Victor learned she mattered to me. 2 weeks later she died in what police called an accident. Emma's legs nearly gave out. She grabbed the back of a chair. No. I'm sorry. His voice was raw. I'm so sorry. You knew her, Emma whispered. All this time. Yes. And you never told me. Your father made me promise. The words came hard now. Before he died, he said Emma is all my wife has left. Victor already took one daughter. If he ever suspects the second matters to you, he'll take her too. Protect her. But keep her hidden, asterisk. Emma stared at him through a blur of tears. So you married me. When your father's debt file resurfaced, it gave me legal reason to bring you under my control, into my house, under protection. He laughed softly, bitterly. Not the sort of sentence a man should ever say to the woman he was trying to save. All those things you did were meant to make Victor believe you were nothing to me. Emma thought of the gala, the cameras, the way Victor had watched, the party, the comments. If Victor saw affection, you became leverage. The servant's wing. The most secure room in the house. My business course. I shut down the open network because it could be monitored. The secure program was untraceable. The dinner with Victor. Alexander's hands curled once at his sides. He was testing me. If I defended you, he would know. Emma swallowed hard. So you insulted me? Yes. And my mother? I couldn't let her visit because if Victor had eyes on this house, he would connect her to you and then to me. His voice dropped. I would never put her in his line of fire. Emma had wanted truth. Now that she had it, it hurt in entirely different ways. You should have told me. His answer came immediately. Could you have done it? She frowned. Could you have looked at me with hatred in your eyes in front of Victor if you knew? He asked. Could you have convinced him you meant nothing to me? Emma opened her mouth and closed it. Alexander looked at her as if the sight of her standing there was both relief and punishment. You are too honest, Emma. Too transparent when you care. It would have shown. Her heart stumbled. When do I care? He went very still. For the first time since she had known him, Alexander Knight looked unsure. I review security every night, he said quietly. Not because I enjoy surveillance. Because I needed to know you were safe. The first week, before you learned to hate me, I saw how you looked at me. Heat rushed to her face despite everything. And how was that? Like I might have been a man instead of a prison. The room seemed to narrow around them. He looked away first. I had no right to let myself feel anything. Not after Olivia. Not with the promise I made your father. But every day you were in this house, arguing with me, refusing to break. His voice roughened. Every cruel thing I said to save you made me despise myself a little more. Emma's anger was not gone, neither was the grief. But beneath both, something gentler and more dangerous was rising. You loved my sister, she said. Yes. And now? A muscle moved in his jaw. Now I would burn the world down before I let him touch you. The words landed between them like a vow. Emma took one step toward him. Then another. The handkerchief you gave me at the dinner, she said softly. I finally read the note. His eyes searched hers. And? It said trust me. Yes. It took me a while, Emma said, voice breaking. But I do. I trust you. Something in his face cracked open. Emma. I love you. He made a sound halfway between a laugh and a surrender before pulling her into him and kissing her at last. Nothing contractual, nothing careful, nothing hidden. When he lifted his head, his forehead rested against hers. No more masks, he murmured. No more masks, she agreed. 6 months later. Emma stood at a podium in a Navy graduation gown, looking out over a hall full of faces. Her mother sat in the front row, healthier than Emma had seen her in years, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Marcus sat beside her, trying and failing to look stern. And next to them sat Alexander, wedding ring visible on his hand, gaze fixed on Emma with none of the old distance left in it. As valedictorian, she began, and heard scattered applause, I'm supposed to say something inspiring about perseverance and ambition. A few people laughed. I could do that. But the truth is, the most important thing I learned this year was not in finance or strategy. It was this. Love is not always gentle at first glance. Sometimes it arrives in ugly packaging. Sometimes it looks like a sacrifice. Sometimes it wears the mask of cruelty because the world is crueler still, and protecting what matters demands impossible choices. Her gaze found Alexander's. He did not look away. My father once told me that character is what remains when appearances are stripped away. I didn't understand that until recently. I thought strength was hardness. I thought devotion would always look warm, obvious, easy to recognize. She smiled softly. I was wrong. Sometimes the deepest devotion is hidden in the things we misjudge. In the doors that close to keep danger out. In the distance someone forces between you because they would rather be hated than lose you. The room had gone very still. Emma's voice gentled. Sometimes, if you are very lucky, the truth waits long enough for you to see it clearly. When the applause rose, Alexander stood first. Emma smiled down at him, at her mother, at the life she had almost walked away from because she mistook the shape of its protection. The cold billionaire who had seemed heartless. The cruel husband who had built walls around her and called them punishment. The man who had turned every sharp word into armor and every wound into a shield. In the end, the greatest twist of all was simple. Every time he hurt her, he had been trying to save her. And now, with the danger gone and the truth finally laid bare, he no longer had to love her from behind a mask. Neither of them did. If you felt every cruel word, every hidden truth, and every moment Emma thought she was unloved, follow for more stories where the villain isn't who you think. Some love stories don't start with roses and sweet words. Some start with locked doors, brutal insults, and a husband who would rather be hated than let you die. Subscribe for more stories.